About 25 years ago, I was a young associate in a large South Florida law firm. I was going through a rough time in life, contemplating the meaning of life and things like that, and I had a coworker who seemed to have it all together. Even though I'd known his backstory, which was terrible, he was happy and he was content, and people liked him, and he just didn't seem to have a care in the world. So one afternoon I went to him and I said, "Listen, I need to know what makes you so happy." And he said, "Do you really want to know?" And I said, "Yes, I do." So he called me into his office and closed the door and asked me to grab a book off the shelf. And when I grabbed the book he was pointing to, I took it out and I noticed it said Holy Bible on the cover. And I said to him, "This is the Christian Bible as far as I can tell, and it's not for me, I'm Jewish." So he opened it up to the book of Romans, chapter 1, had me read verse 16. "The gospel is the power of God for the salvation of all who believe, to the Jew first, and also for the Gentile." And I said, "Okay, so it's for Jewish people, but what is it?" And he explained the gospel very simply. You're a mess and God loves you anyway. And I said, "That's true, and who is this God? I'm interested." And he said, "He's the God of the universe, and if you submit to him, he'll guide your life, he'll lead you." So I said thank you and left, and a few days later in my office, I dropped to my knees, and my prayer was simple. "Okay, God, I want in. I don't want to be the way I was. I want to submit my life to you. If you are who Jimmy says you are, save me." And he did. I went back to my friend Jim and I said, "Now what do I do?" And he gave me a bunch of cassette tapes of Bible teaching on the book of Romans. Steve Brown was the Bible teacher. I listened to that. Then I said, "What do I do?" And he said, "Well, now you need to go to a church." I said, "I don't know of any churches. Where do I go?" And he sent me to the one he was attending. And I attended. I went there on Sundays. I sat in the back corner of the room. I was so afraid that people were going to find out that I was a Jewish guy and I didn't belong there. But that never happened. And I started to learn and learn more and more. And I knew that I needed to know more. And so I thought about going to a seminary somewhere else and moving the family and following up on this dream that I had. And then the pastor of the church we were attending said, "Listen, we're starting an extension branch of a seminary here. Would you like to be a student?" And so I did. I signed up. I was the first student. And for the next 6 years, I worked on that 3-year degree. And I received my Master of Divinity. When I got it, I hung it up on my law office wall. And I said, "Okay, that's great. That's it." And then the pastors of the church I was attending came to me and they said to me, "Would you be interested in leaving your law practice and coming to become a pastor full time?" I told God I'd do anything he asked. And so I said yes. About 4 years into my ministry work, they asked me to head out to West Boca to replant a church that already existed, West Boca Presbyterian Church. I'd not ever heard of it before, so they told me where it was, and I drove out this way and quite frankly couldn't find the place from the street. It was so overgrown and so dilapidated really that I just couldn't see it. You couldn't see it from the street. But eventually I found it and preached the first time, and then they said to me, "We'd like you to be the senior pastor. We'd like you to restart it." And I thought, okay, I did promise God I'll do whatever he asked, but at the time I was coming from a church where there were about 60 or 70 employees to a church where I would be the only employee. I was coming to a place where there was no stability, where there was a complete rebuild that needed to take place. They'd gone through a terrible church split. But I told God I'd do what he said, so I went and I came in. And then we began the process of trying to rebuild a culture. So shortly after I got to the church, we changed the name from West Boca Presbyterian Church to Hammock Street Church, which is where we're located. So we figured we'd tell people. And then we started to implement the vision that God had given me about having a church, having a local church. We changed the tone of the place. We changed the style. We changed the outreach. We took it from a church that really wasn't visible from the street to a church where, even though we're tucked back here in a neighborhood, people knew about. We changed it from a place that was interested in overseas missions, but didn't pay a whole lot of attention to what's going on right here in South Florida. So we made those changes as well. And when I say we, I mean me. because I was the employee. And so it was very interesting to find out that after seminary and you learn all this theology and you learn everything about the Bible, that you don't really learn about starting operations and running churches and replanting and setting a vision. But I had a crash course in all of those things when I came out to what is now Hammock Street Church. So when I arrived, I had the task of turning a church that was quite traditional and quite inward focused into a church that was not traditional and more outward focused. I was challenged to make it a church where the gospel was preached and the community was reached, a church where not only was it seeker sensitive, but it was a church for people who didn't much like church. And that was a hill I had to climb. And it took a little while. So dealing with some of the old leadership, they still wanted to do things the way things were done in the past, and they would suggest church visions that were, I found, more confusing than they were clarifying. It's interesting, we see in the denominational world that denominations themselves tend to be shrinking as they become more internally focused. And the growth of the church we're seeing around the world is the growth of the church from conversion, from sharing the gospel, from being outwardly focused. And so I wanted to make sure that our church was simple and straightforward and inviting for people who didn't know God, but who wanted to know God. People who were like I was, who didn't have the first clue about God and know who Jesus is and know what Jesus means in a person's life. And we thought, okay, we need to make that happen here at Hammock Street Church. So we started to get to work on it, and we began to change the way we did services and the way we did music and the way we did Bible study and the way we did Bible teaching. But it took time. It was a hybrid for a while, and hybrids are mixes of things that operate but don't always operate optimally. I used to be a cyclist, and when you're going to ride on the mountain, you get a mountain bike, and when you're going to ride on the road, you get a road bike. But there are bikes called hybrids too, which are not great in the mountains, but they're not great on the road. They can do both, but they don't do either very well, and I didn't want to have a hybrid church any longer than I had to. So we moved through the hybrid period as best as we could, taking the church as it was and beginning to recreate it to become the church that we had envisioned it could be. Taking the people that were here and bringing in new people who bought into the vision of being a church that reached out to the community, a church that included the community, a church that was here for the community. And so over a few years worth of time, we were able to implement those things slowly but surely, and God kept blessing our effort. So once we rebranded and changed the look of the place a bit and built a steady foundation of where we wanted to go, real community life, then it was time to start to build on that foundation. So over a little bit of time, we started to build our staff. Beth came over to become our church business administrator. We were able to hire a youth pastor. We were able to hire a part-time music director. And so as we were growing, we're building, and our outreach is growing. Additionally, we're able to do some more proper mission trips, and we're able to serve some refugee communities and really let our vision be known. Then after a while, we upgraded our staff again and brought on some more people and brought on different people and more full-time people. But then we needed really also to consider our building and our physical plant. Where we were, we had a church, and it had been there for about 25 years or so, but it was run down, and it was costing more than it was worth to keep up, and we were facing these large expenditures, and we started to look into how to maximize the property, how to have a physical plant that would be attractive to people but also would suit our needs and help us to get the ministry done that we were called to do. So we entered into a partnership with a number of organizations trying to figure out a way to bring a charter school onto the property so that we could build a campus where we would be able to serve the community with a school and a church. The process took us about 4 or 5 years. We had to actually move our way through the legislature. We had to have some regulations changed. We had to have some law changed. We had to take trips to Tallahassee to really implement the vision. But God was able to superintend the whole process with us. We were able to partner with a charter school and rebuild the property, where we have this sanctuary now, not too big, but not too small, capable of being a comfortable place for us all to gather together as a community, as an ecclesia, also capable of being able to support the work of the ministry in our community, capable of raising up volunteers. We now have so many volunteers that are on board with the vision, on board with the mission that God has given us to share the gospel with our community, to make unchurched people into people who love Jesus. So now we're able to head into the future focused on solid vision while standing on solid ground. So after about 8.5 years, it was time for the next piece of the puzzle. We knocked down the building we've been meeting in, which brought up challenges on its own. It was interesting. From that point, we had to go somewhere else. That was our wilderness. We spent about 10 months in the elementary school cafeteria next door. But during that time, we were able to tell everyone, it's coming. We're going to have a space that's going to suit our needs and take us into the next iteration of Hammock Street Church. September 30, we were able to come into this building that we had designed to suit our needs specifically, but also onto this campus where we now had this charter school. We now had a community of people that we could reach out to, that we could interact with, that we could invite to come alongside of us and to do life with. So actually, this is the best time to be a part of Hammock Street Church, because here we are. Our foundation is set. Our church is built, and we're ready to impact the community. And we wanted to be a community of believers where everybody knew that they could contribute. Not just a place where if you're good at your Bible study or you can talk, you can do something, but where you could serve with whatever gifts and talents God has given you. And so we want to be a place that's open for people who are just looking to be a part of God's work here in Boca Raton. We've gone from pieces to promise. The promise of engaging the community, the promise of making a difference, the promise of being that place that people talk about. Oh, those people from Hammock Street Church, they sure do love. Wow, those people from Hammock Street Church, they really care about our community. We want to be that place where people come to meet Jesus, where people can interact with God in a way that's not weird, in a way that suits their life, in a way that they can really do on a day-to-day basis, where they can make friends, lifelong friends, where they can feel like they're part of something. South Florida is a place where we have people from all over the world. We have people from 28 countries at this church. We have people who left their family in other parts of the country, other parts of the world, and they've come here and they don't know anyone, but here they found family, here they found friends, here they found ecclesia, community. We want to keep on doing that going forward. We want you all to be a part of what God is doing here at Hammock Street Church. This is an exciting time for Hammock Street Church, and we're really glad that you're a part of it.